With the understanding, you take a look at the different logical types of thinking and cut out all of the particulars of what you're thinking about. What's left, you see? Certain logical concepts that are in use. A conceptual apparatus that's functioning there. Yeah. Okay. All right, he's still not satisfied that this is enough. And for two reasons. One is the fact that we have a variety of sense perceptions coming at us through 5 different senses, so that our perceptions are so utterly fragmented in their sources, yet somehow or other unified in our experience. So you need to explain the unity of our perceptions, the unity of the perceptual field. Okay? The second thing is that while you have the forms of perception, the categories of understanding, what gets them together? How do they meet? This is Kant's equivalent of the mind-body problem. The perceptions that come into the mind, and then the understanding that gets a hold of that. Perceptions are particular, the categories are universal. How do they get together? And that's what he's talking about in the schematism of the understanding. Okay? So this is the unity of perception, and this has to do with the unification of perception and thought in the understanding. Okay. Now, this is a segment that I did not ask you to outline, but tremendously important for the completion of the story and for some of the things which arise out of it. Now, as far as the unifying of experience is concerned, his initial statement is on page 391. And I want you to take a look at that. It's the second paragraph on 391, first column, where he says this: if every single representation stood by itself, okay, every particular sense idea, simple idea, if every simple idea stood by itself, isolated, separated from the others, nothing like what we call knowledge could ever arise, because knowledge forms a whole of representations connected, compared with each other. You know, how do you get to begin with from simple ideas to complex ideas? Hume said there are principles of association, psychological association, resemblance, contiguity, cause and effect. You see. What's Kant going to say? Well, he says, I ascribe to the senses a synopsis. Synopsis, seeing together, opsis from optical. Synopsis is seeing it together. I ascribe to the senses capacity to see it together, because in their intuition they contain something manifold. There corresponds to it always a synthesis. Receptivity can make knowledge possible only when joined with spontaneity. This spontaneity appears threefold, which must necessarily take place in every kind of knowledge. First, there is apprehension. the synthesis that is apprehension, apprehending. Okay? That is to say, being aware of it, grasping it as one. And the apprehension is in representations. The apprehension of representations as modifications of the soul in the intuition, the Anshang, the insight. Secondly, reproduction of them in the imagination. There's that funny word again. Reproduction of them in the imagination. And that sounds like it's the old use of the word. When you're reproducing something in the imagination, it sounds like memory. And third is the recognition in concepts. So you have the synthesis of apprehension, you have synthesis in reproduction, you have synthesis in recognition. And in the pages that follow, he takes up each of these. Now, the apprehension is being aware of representations under the form of time. That is to say, you apprehend things as a temporal unity. Remember, burp, burp, burp. Now you heard that as three, but you heard it as one. A temporal unity. And particularly when I speed it up, brr, you hear it as one. Oh, maybe if you listen closely, three, maybe four. So that there is a synthesis that goes on in the act of apprehension under the form of time. Now, reproduction comes on 392. Reproduction by the imagination. Yeah, and he appeals to the association of ideas imaginatively. The imaginative association of ideas. Yeah. Because if you try to reproduce that sound that I made, you must first imagine it in reproducing it. It's an imaginative reproduction. You see. So the imagination is at work then in being able to reproduce it in memory. You see, in memory or in actual fact. Imagination. And in order to associate ideas by virtue of their similarity and in developing empirical concepts of greater generality, then we have to remember other cases in order to combine them with these cases. So the imagination is at work in any generalization. And then there is recognition in regards to concepts. Recognition in regards to concepts. General concepts that are necessary for recognition. Now, those general concepts, of course, are drawn from the categorical structure of the understanding. Now, look on page 394. 394. And he gives you an example. The first full paragraph on 394, no knowledge is possible without a concept, however obscure and imperfect, and a concept is always something general that can serve as a rule. So you measure the complex idea you've been developing in relationship to that concept that's the rule. The concept of a body serves as a rule to our knowledge of external phenomena, according to the unity of the manifold which is thought by it. You see. Now, you get a general complex idea of that thing and that thing and that thing, you see. And what's involved in recognition is the realization that all of these meet the rule for using the abstract concept body. Okay, what's a body? It's a thing, something that exists, a substance. Look that up in his list of categories. So the concept of body, whenever we perceive something outside us, necessitates the representation of extension, impermeability, shape. Yeah. Necessity is always founded on transcendental conditions, and so forth. All right, you have that then representation. Now, you have then three subjective sources at work in this unity of apperception. Apprehension, reproduction, recognition. This is the mechanism at work in the mind, the way it functions in producing that inner synthesis. Now, the outcome of this, then, is that there is a unity to apperception that is transcendental. It is in the inner resource of the human consciousness. And this is what gives rise in Kant's mind to the question, what is this I, this self, this mind that unifies? You see, that's the old issue, isn't it? How naive Descartes now sounds with his I think, therefore I exist, a thinking thing. Where on earth does he get that? I think. My goodness, that's a complicated process. Apprehension, reproduction, recognition, forms, categories, I think. Gives me a headache just to think that. You know? I think, therefore what? I. But a thing, where's the thing in all of it? All you've got is mechanism, function. You see? The most I can say at this stage in the analysis, Kant in effect tells us, the most I can say at this fact in the analysis is that I am a transcendental unity of apperception. I'm the unified totality of all my thought. Well, that's a bit better than what old David Hume did. Well, he said I'm a bundle of perceptions, but didn't have anything to bundle them together with. At least, to bundle them together, Kant has apprehension, reproduction, recognition, and all that implies. And later on, when he gets into the transcendental dialectic on Friday, well, when we get into his transcendental dialectic on Friday, we'll see what he has to say about the conception of something more like a soul. But all he has to start with for the I at this juncture, and all